Moshibudi, Motimele, and I'm doing my PhD at Wits, where SWAP is housed. And I arrived in the space because the young woman who was meant to speak on student and gender politics couldn't make it, and she asked me if I'd come in her place, and so I did. My experience. So, like I was saying before, I was really grateful of the fact that I had no expectation, because I didn't know it was coming forward. I didn't know what the topic was. I didn't know what to expect. When I arrived, I was encouraged by the diversity of people that I saw, although I thought it was quite strange that we were identified by names and nationality. Hearing people speak, especially in the first few panels, who are clearly a part of anti-nationalist struggles, it seemed odd for someone who's sort of fighting against the idea, right, of a Burkina Faso or whatever to now be identified as your name and country. So that was my first engagement of randomness at this conference. But I really liked the framing of the different topics and themes and even the conference, and I wanted to see the extent to which this was another exercise of self-masturbation, where we just reaffirm each other's ideas and existence and activism, or if it was really going to be a critical space thinking practically about how we go back into our different communities and achieve resistance and transformation. So my experience has been mixed. I felt people had really important things to say, but the panels were so packed in terms of contributions, but so limited in terms of time. And I think if you're trying to think differently about these spaces where you're not just talking to people, you want to give majority of the time to engagement and conversation. But the panels took so much time that people were saying things like, we can only have 2 comments. And I think if you're going to bring people together to rethink, you need to give space for questions and comments. So maybe it would have been better if people could have put their contributions of their activism, their work, on some form of platform beforehand and archive. So we already know coming into the space, and we don't waste time with that, because you can't talk about your collective or your group in 10 minutes anyways, in any sort of depth. So that when we come here, we have a sense already of each other and each other's work, and then we can just get to the part of engaging and interacting and asking questions and creating alternatives. I was also speaking to the issue of you could see effort was put to put a mixture of old and young and women and men, but I think in terms of the content, that didn't come out. It seemed more like a window dressing exercise. Like, we're going to have a theme about youth and intergenerationalness, and we're going to commit to talking about gender. But neither of those issues, I think, was interrogated in any type of substantive, useful way. And also, there was a lot of more experienced people, to use a euphemism, which led to a particular type of politics. But I think if you had more young people here who really are walking the walk of an alternative type of politics, in terms of how do we engage, how do we speak, etc., it would have been a completely different situation. So, knowing that young people don't have the resources to pull something like this together, then what is the responsibility of those people who do have the resources in bringing in people to create a different type of environment? And if they're not doing that, what does that say then about the imagination of how we do politics? So, yeah.
Any other thing that you want to add? Perhaps, your input is quite insightful in terms of how Rome would imagine improving the workshop next year in whatever format that they choose to have it. But how would you imagine that it stood out from other spaces, perhaps, that you were part of, negatively or positively? How did it?
I think there's always the intention not to impose, right? So I think there was definitely an attempt at openness, right? But I think we have to go beyond the idea of we're not closing anybody off, two, taking seriously what Napoleon said, how do we make it an open space for people, right? Because otherwise, even these activist, radical, revolutionary spaces are again like a space for your activist scholar or your one person who works in a community collective who's invited, and the only place we see for ordinary people or like the masses of people in our imagination is when they must just be mobilized behind our ideas, right? So just as an instrument of numbers. Okay, now we've brought the theory, Marxism, African nationalism, whatever it is, decolonialism, but we can't have a revolution without people, and the only point when you engage people is at the point of mobilization. So if you want to be serious, and I think someone made the suggestion already, is that stop bringing people to rope, right? To rope Stanton Conference, but take rope out into grassroots organizations, etc. Have the conference in Maragana, have the people like Napoleon as part of the organizing committee, and insulate yourself in an actual community that is working through these issues. Or you can come to Emoyen and look over Sandton and Parktown and Rosebank and, like, you know what I mean? Remove people from their activist spaces, remove them from their theoretical inspiration and motivations into a literal ivory tower, and then hope that they'll go back and there'll be some form of solidarity. You know what I mean? Like, be serious. Walk your talk, or walk your think. Think your walk. A lot of things going on there, but you know, literally do the praxis of your principles, right? And then we can have those uncomfortable conversations like, what about safety? Is Maragana like okay for white people to, you know what I'm saying? Rather than bringing people into these isolated places where you're comfortable. Nothing revolutionary or radical comes out of being comfortable, I think.
With that said, I don't know, do you want to add anything to your experience?
I mean, I do. ROPE has a publication, right? This Journal of African Political Economy, etc. And I think just the idea of publication is so implicated in the ways in which people are thinking through how people are gatekept out of the university, out of professorships, out of etc., right? And I read the previous publication from these types of gatherings. And I think as a form, a journal is never going to be a revolutionary document that helps any type of politics, right? So ROPE in and of itself has to think again about how it is that its ideas are disseminated, that they go all the way to Accra and Dar and spend all this money and do all these things to create a journal that then only the next people who are going to participate in these things are going to read, right? That don't inform any type of community politics. Or are we thinking differently about the different types of platforms and technologies to be able to inform actual politics, right? And to be open to critique, because to open up your platforms to ordinary people, they're going to tell you, nah, we are not peasants. The amount of times I've heard the word peasant here and I've wanted to die. Like, stop referring to us as peasants, because that's the subject that we inform in your theory of Marxism, right? Like, you're not going to go to a group meeting in any community and call people peasants. So be open to critique, be open to being uncomfortable, and the only way you do that is to be open to real people and not just like-minded activist scholars.